Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari. Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yamuna Tiravanachari. Yamuna Tiravanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari. 30. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Statara Parvikacharyas Divine Grace Abhayacharana Vinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Natakoti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Brahmse Kaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhaktivedanta Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopina Shamakunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Shri Vrindavadam Ki Jai. Shri Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Shri Gangamai Ki Jai. Shri Jamunamai Ki Jai. Shri Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Shri Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories, all glories, all glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Krishna, on the advice of senior devotee Omkar Prabhu, I'm going to just read today's text from the Srimad Bhagavatam to continue hearing about the song of the bee and the exchange between, why can't I think of his name? The gopis and Uddhava. And then we're going to talk about Bhaktivinoda Thakur, who is a very, very important Vaishnava in our parampara, and someone that each day we worship and we derive inspiration from his life and precepts. So first, there's text 30. Atmanyevatmanatmanam Shri Jehanmyanupalaye Atma Mayunubhavena Bhutendriya Gunatmana. Prabhus. Atma evatmanatmanam Shri Jehanmanupalaye Atma Mayanubhavena Bhutendriya Gunatmana Atmaneva Manatmanam Shri Jehanmanupalaye Atma Mayanubhavena Bhutendriya Gunatmana Atmani, within myself. Eva, indeed. Atmana, by myself. Atmanam, myself. Shrije, I create. Hanmi, I destroy. Anupalaye, I sustain. Atma, my own. Maya, of the mystic potency. Anubhavena, by the power. Bhuta, the material elements. Indriya, the senses. Guna, and the modes of nature. Atmana, comprising. Translation, we can all read together. It's a very impactful and absolute verse. By myself, I create, sustain, and withdraw myself within myself by the power of my personal energy, which comprises the material elements, the senses, and the modes of nature. Purport by the servants of His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. Although the Lord is the supreme entity, there is no absolute duality between Him and His creation, since the creation is an extension of His being. This oneness is here emphasized by the Lord. Om Jnana Tinamandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunminitam Yanai Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Vir Krishna Das Gosamaniti Namine Namaham Sanakashaya Prabhupada Priyayate Sudrida Sudhi Nistyambam Tashavaki Navadine Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nivishesha Sunyavadi Pashyata Desatadine. By myself I create, sustain, and withdraw myself within myself by the power of my personal energy, which comprises the material elements, the senses, and the modes of nature. Although the Lord is the supreme entity, there is no absolute duality between Him and His creation, since the creation is an extension of His being. This oneness is here emphasized by the Lord. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, I am the subject doing action, the location of action, and the object of action. Within me, the support, Atmani, I, the subject, create the universe which is myself, the object. But you are Satchid Ananda, and this universe appears to be different from you. This is sort of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur playing devil's advocate. The universe is a result of my Maya Shakti. I create the elements by that Shakti. Being my external energy, the Maya Shakti, though one of my forms, is not my Swarup. For the gopis, the meaning is as follows. I make my appearance, Atmanam Srijami, in your minds, Atmani, by my own effort, Atmana. For enjoyment, I maintain that form for a moment, Anupalaye, and then I make that form disappear, Hanmi. By what effort, he says? By the power of Yoga Maya, Atma Maya Anubhavena. What is yourself, Atmanam, that you make appear? That form with all my limbs, Bhutani, my senses, Indriya, such as eyes, my qualities, Guna, such as beauty, sweetness, and cleverness, and intelligence, Atma. Taken as one element, the compound is expressed in the singular form. Jiva Goswami says, the first meaning is as follows. It is difficult for one object to be the material cause and the antaryami. For instance, in a pot, it is impossible to have antaryami since it is only dirt. According to another opinion, the material cause is atoms, which are unconscious. The conscious entity is the Lord or controller. This verse answers the objection. In the basis, Atmani, by the efficient cause, Atmana, I manifest the material cause, Atmanam, as the elements, senses, gunas, and the jiva. Another version has Buddhi Nidra. In that case, the elements are all understood to be included. But the Atma is only one, the basis, Adhisthana. How can it be many things at once? To dispel all doubts, it is then said that this takes place by the power of Achintya Shakti, Atma Mayuna Bhavena. Srutes tu sabda mulavat. Scripture is the meaning and is for the gopis as follows. I make my appearance, Scripture is the source of knowledge of the powers of the Lord. Brahma Sutra, Canto 2, Chapter 1, Text 27. One sees this amazing nature also in the Chintamani. The second meaning is as follows. It is true that you appear to use us as a spurti, but we do not appear to you. This type of meeting is a false meeting, though different from a dream. In answer to this, he speaks the second meaning. In my heart, Atmani, which is changeless, by my mind, Atmana, composed of accepting and rejecting, I make Srijami efforts, Atmanam, for meeting you and having pastimes with you. Vishva Prakash says Atma can mean body. Brahman, intelligence, mind, nature, determination, and effort. Not only do I make efforts, but I increase, Anupalaye, the meanings and pastimes over a long period of time, and then separate, Hanmi, from them in order to have different pastimes. You should know other pastimes that I do also. What type of mind is this? My mind is influenced, Anubhavena, by compassion for you, Atmamaya, or is influenced by your mercy to me. What type of mind is this? In that mind there are directly present Bhuta, the Ahankara, Atmana, sense objects, guna, and senses. If the version with buddhi is accepted, then the meaning is as follows. You make efforts by your mind. This is all simply desires. How will your efforts come true? My mind is composed, Atmana, of the qualities of intelligence such as discrimination and the qualities of the senses such as seeing. My mind develops direct perception of what I decide after considering carefully. Because of the influence of my compassion for you and your compassion for me, external perception of separation is disregarded. So here, actually, Krishna is trying to explain the gopis the concept of aptakama. Means whatever he thinks of, excuse me, whatever he thinks of, whatever he wants is immediately manifest. He's actually trying to explain, break this down in kind of understandable terms for the gopis and thereby for us. The third meaning is as follows. How is manifestation possible? In my Swarup, by my Atma, I create the special manifestation Atmanam, or I make my appearance. This is similar to the statement in the Gita, Atmanam Srijamiyamam, I manifest myself. Bhagavad Gita, chapter 4, text 7. I protect the cherished pastimes, and after they are concluded, I make them disappear. How do you create by yourself, Atmana? I create by myself, Atmana, endowed with the power of my Achintya Shakti. Atmanamya Nubhavena. How is this described? That Atma is my Swarup, Atma, endowed with Nityasiddha, Bhutani, senses, qualities, and form. In the version with Buddhi instead of Bhuta, the meaning is Atma endowed with Antarkarana, Buddhi, senses and qualities arising from my Swarup, Atmana. This is a real manifestation of my spiritual form, not some transformation. So Krishna's thereby, it's not like he throws, with his mind, he's having everybody perceive some alternate idea or some external perception. He's actually manifesting these things through his will and through all of his, the components as he's explaining here. And through our perception and, as it says, buddhi, senses, and qualities, we can understand what Krishna conveys, or the gopis can understand what Krishna conveys. I take that back. We can't really understand what Krishna is trying to convey because our senses are quite limited. Our perception is limited. But he's, just like in this material world, he's actually, he's manifesting everything here for us to see. And I'm sure if we went around the room and we all closed our eyes and we tried to recreate what we see around this room, it would be a little bit different. But with Krishna, he's actually, he's showing a side that only he can provide, and then he's maintaining that for some time while everybody has an experience. It's actually a really interesting concept. It's kind of like when you see magicians, on a mundane level. It's when I'm sure we've all seen magicians do tricks, and they have their way of throwing out an appearance of how a trick is actually done versus, the background of how they're actually, we've seen somebody goes out of one box on one side and appears in another box on another side, and usually there's some kind of hidden pathway where somebody can appear on the other side. So, that's a very mundane, but in the perception of the viewer, it's all seamless. Somebody's disappearing and then somebody's appearing in another place, and it looks very fantastic. But, Krishna doesn't have to resort to those things since he's aptakama, and he can just manifest, he can imagine whatever he wants, and then it'll happen, which he's trying to break down here. It's a kind of a little bit hard to grasp because our senses are limited. And then lastly, Sanatana Goswami says, you should not think that it is impossible for me to be situated with you in Braja, though I am in Mathura, since I have inconceivable Shakti. By my various powers, I manifest myself, disappear, and continually maintain myself in myself. Since I am the basis, the cause, the action, and the doer, I have no relationship with any other cause. You create by your Maya made of the three gunas. What is that to us, say the gopis? I manifest and disappear by the power of my Chit Shakti, Atma Manayubhavena. What are these other forms of yours to us? we desire to attain you, the son of Nanda. I manifest my attractive form with natural atmana qualities and senses, indriya guna, for all jivas, bhuta. And I'm imagining that's in our limited perception. That's why each day when we greet the deities, for instance, for instance, each day we're refreshed and we look at them and we think, wow, they look so beautiful. They look more beautiful today than any other day. You know, there's always there's never any limit to Krishna's manifestation of all of his qualities and his power. You know, there's no limit. So we can perceive minutely those things, but, you know, obviously the gopis had a much different experience with Krishna when he was, for instance, simultaneously with each one of them in the rasa dance, and he was interacting with them on an individual basis, and they all thought that he was, you know, only there for them. So they all have that individual perception, which, you know, in our view, in this time and place, makes it very wonderful because on a daily basis, I'm sure everyone can attest that, you know, fresh inspiration or fresh realization or a little bit clarified view of Krishna would arise if we're chanting the Maha Mantra, we're doing our devotional service, we're sincerely trying to understand Krishna and please Krishna. Little by little, he reveals those aspects of himself. And with that, I'm going to actually talk a little bit about Bhaktivinoda Thakur because Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he was actually, for us in the Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya that we adhere to through the grace of Srila Prabhupada, Bhaktivinoda Thakur was actually, he was the first one to, in his time, to understand these points about Krishna actually, or have some perception, because before that, the Vaishnava Dharma was minimized, not completely lost, but it was minimized and it was also misunderstood because when Bhaktivinoda Thakur was born, and I'm just going to read some excerpts, some things I found online because there's so much actually of information about Bhaktivinoda Thakur. I could talk for 10 hours and probably we wouldn't finish talking about Bhaktivinoda Thakur and all of his contributions to the Gaudiya Vaishnava philosophy and practice like that. But when he was born, which was in 1838, this was in the 1800s, and still the British Raj was in place, and they were also, I'm going to say they had quite a hand in minimizing, Vaishnava teachings or, talk about love of God. They were only in India to rule and to lord it over, so they weren't really espousing any of those things. And, the people are going to do, like we see in this country, what the commoners, what the kings, what everybody's kind of into, then, everybody's going to follow. So when Bhaktivinoda Thakur was born, he went through all of his schooling, and he had quite a lot of schooling. I was kind of reading about some of his, what he did when he was young, and he finished his studies when he was 21, but that was after some strife when he grew up. He grew up in a nice village called Bir Nagar, and he was in a traditional family, and it was a wealthy and well-to-do town even. The village was affluent. There was many natural, resources. It was a beautiful place. And over time, it actually fell into, it was predicted that it would fall into, disarray or disrepair, or pestilence like that. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur was actually forced from a young age, just from family circumstances. He had a brother, an older brother, that died of cholera when he was young. And, his father actually was a adherent or a follower of Lord Nityananda. His mother really wasn't very much into the Vaishnava teaching, but his father was very staunch devotee of Lord Nityananda. So from a young age, he knew a little bit about Vaishnavism, but until he got a little bit older and he started reading bits and pieces, and not that much was actually given about Lord Chaitanya, did he become a little bit interested in trying to learn more about Vaishnava sect. And he struck out on his own. He was looking for publications. He really couldn't get his hands on a Chaitanya Charitamrita. When he was very young, he was in his late teens, he was trying to find some of the publications of Lord Chaitanya, and he was having a bit of difficulty. But at some point, he was able to gather resources and, bring in some of the literatures that were seemingly lost, such as the Srimad Bhagavatam and the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And since there was so little information, and he was slowly becoming more and more, not only fascinated, but an adherent to Vaishnava culture, because he was kind of an intellectual. He wasn't wholly and solely, from a young age, like we hear about Prabhupada. His father inculcated in him from a young age to, the worship of Radha and Krishna. But actually, that wasn't the case with Bhaktivinoda Thakur, which I feel like speaks to, even we see examples like sometimes people are born into Krishna consciousness and they can't really appreciate it that much. They're not really, since it's kind of just handed to them, they take it for granted, But Bhaktivinoda Thakur, little by little, as he was an extremely, obviously, intelligent person, and he was going through all of his studies, and there was aspects of Vaishnavism that were, particularly with his father as an adherent or a worshiper of Lord Nityananda. There was persons in the area, because he was born in, not far from Orissa and all the places where Lord Chaitanya actually performed his pastimes. So, there was still little bits of evidence. And you know how it is when you see something that looks interesting and you might just see, passing mentions of it around, and then you actually think, oh, wow, I want to learn a little bit more about this. This sounds interesting. So that was actually Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And little by little, not until he was actually 29, because he was also, the culture at the time in India was to, he learned English very expertly, writing and even poetry and the language. He actually learned English very young, as was kind of propounded for everybody to do in India at the time. And, he was kind of dabbling in, he was learning about some of the Western religions, even Christianity. He was learning different languages so he could hear more about. He was doing a lot of comparative religion study, from at a young age, because there was a lot of international sources that were being fed into India. When he was even going through his English studies, of course they're going to talk about Christianity. They're going to talk about all those things. So he was doing some comparative religion from a young age, and he was a very upstanding individual who everybody respected, because he was, no nonsense. Even when he was young, he was no nonsense. He was regulated. He was, real, he was just a really solid personality. And then he started taking jobs when he was seen to be a very qualified person. He was taking different posts in the government. So he was working for the government. He was kind of, still trying to feel his way around. And actually, it's said that until he was about 28 or 29 years old, he really wasn't so staunch of a follower of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So that he was, a little bit of an older young man. But when he sort of got his teeth into that, then he dedicated himself. He was completely absorbed. He began his japa practice. He began, studying what he could find, which wasn't much. Then he started to inquire, because he had some connections as a government person, government employee. He had connections with other villages, so he was on a mission to try to find more information about Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who up until that point, with his dad being a follower of Lord Nityananda, he had heard a little bit about, but really nothing in depth, because that wasn't the culture in India. And by the way, he was named Kedarnath Dat when he was born. But then later on, after he had written a lot of things that were recognized even abroad, because he was such a so erudite in English, like he was erudite, but he was able to also put it all in English verbiage. Then, he was mentioned by many English scholars, particularly the British, because they were there, they were occupying, and they were reading some of his work, and he began to get a lot of accolades, and people were admiring and, glorifying all of his contributions. And just little by little, because he was such an exemplary person, and he was looked upon as sort of a leader, the local communities started to follow him more. He was really like a shining star. He was like a beacon to those who had maybe heard a little bit about Gaudiya Vaishnavism, but they didn't really know very much. So he was actually becoming more illustrious in the villages there. And there's so much he did. We only have a little bit of time. He wrote so many. He started writing. He started a lot of prolific, even periodicals and small publications. He just was constantly writing, because he had that power. He could write well in English, which, as we know, he sort of passed along to his son, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, but that's another piece. That he began writing so many things, and actually his contributions, literary contributions particularly, were almost rivaling Jiva Goswami's in the volume, because he was also very intent on reviving the worship or the glorification of the Lord. Once he began really taking spiritual practice and his own, personal bhajan, really seriously, he was really, really deep. He was deep with in the beginning when he was just studying. He was, very fixed on his schoolwork. He was trying his best to, just make everything. It seems like he was just trying to improve the lives of everyone at the time, because he knew that was the absolute truth, and he was fixated on that. So as he was, becoming more and more kind of powerful with his bhajan, and that's how we all sort of gain our power in bhakti, or not power, but, our luster, our energy, where we can give out to others, we can tune our output by, a really fixed and healthy and deep bhajan, consisting of chanting the holy names and the devotional service that we do and glorifying the Lord. So he began writing a lot of, probably we all know, such as Jaya Radha Madhava, and there's so many songs. He began writing a lot of songs and poetry glorifying the Lord to bring back that kind of mood of songs in praise of the Lord, which is a bona fide, that's one of the 9 processes, is, sort of singing or praising, about the Lord, speaking about the Lord, but in song form, much in the way Narottama Das Thakur did, before him. He actually was a contemporary with that, where he was writing a lot of songs in glorification of the Lord, and so he was doing that in that same vein, much more extensively, I will say, and with also poems, various poems that, sound very English. I actually have one I'm going to read at the end because it's about Haridas Thakur, and tomorrow is actually the appearance day of Haridas Thakur. But I wanted to read just from this. This is by Garuda Das, some of his interesting parts that are I feel like they're very inspiring. He had the dream about, seeing Mayapur. He was on a rooftop, and he, in the distance, he saw like an effulgence and extremely tall tree that had strange markings, and he could actually see or maybe understand where the birthplace was. He discovered the birthplace of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, which was then confirmed by Jagannath Das Babaji. He so many contributions of. He started Namahata, where he would travel around even, or have, other people would travel around, and they would sing the songs of the Lord or chant about the Lord. And he would go out preaching, and, he began to also win the favor even of a lot of the British rule at the time, because he was such an exemplary personality. Then he established deities at the Yoga Pit when he had, after he had discovered, where the birthplace was, and then he started to write more things about Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and send them to the West so people in the West could start. He kind of laid the groundwork, or at least made the ground fertile for the West's embrace of the Gaudiya Vaishnava, ideals. And then he took sannyas later. He was actually only sannyas for maybe 7, 8 years before he left the world, but he gave up at some point he gave up all of his duties, all of his governmental duties, and, just sort of said he was disabled to some extent, and he couldn't go anywhere, so he would just sit and he would chant and do his bhajan. But I just wanted to read a little bit about, this is always a favorite, to read about his day, because by a snapshot about a Paramahamsa's, just what their daily activities are, we can understand how he did his whole life, because we hear about the 6 Goswamis, their activities and their bhajan and their things were like lines on a stone. They could not be broken. They weren't flexible, just extremely rigid in his thinking of, when he needs to, his chanting of the holy names, his glorification of the Lord. Bhaktivinoda Thakur's daily schedule while he was staying in Jagannath Puri, He was never idle and always engaged of the service of the Lord. Between 7:30 and 8 o'clock at night, he would take rest and would rise from bed just before 10 p.m. That time he would light his oil lamp and begin to write books until about 4 a.m. Then he would take a little more rest and would rise just before 4:30 for washing his hands and face, and then he would sit down and chant on his beads. He never showed his japamala to anyone, and he would chant unlimited rounds daily. At 7 a.m. he would complete all of his correspondence, and at 7:30 he would read highly philosophical religious books. He still was doing comparative religious study up until the end, because in that way he could understand how he could sort of imbue some of the teachings of Gaudiya Vaishnavism within, say, the Christian theology or the Muslim or like that. At 8:30 in the morning, if anyone came to see him, he could meet them then. If no one came, he would continue to read until 9:30, during which time he would walk on the veranda and think of different religious questions and solve them in his mind. Sometimes he would solve them out loud as if he were preaching to someone. From 9:30 to 9:45, he would take a little rest, and at 9:45, he would take his bath and eat breakfast, which consisted of half a quart of milk, a couple of chapatis, and some fruit. At 9:55, he would put on his office dress and go to the court in his carriage. As a magistrate, he would wear a coat and pants. On his neck, he wore 6 strands of double-sized Tulsi beads. And tilak he would wear to court, too, every single day. He was very strong in his court decisions. He would decide them immediately. None could stand before him, and he did not allow any nonsense in his court. He would do his business and go. He would go to court wearing those pants, his big coat, neck beads, and tilak. He would shave his head monthly and never cared about what anyone thought. At 10 o'clock, he would begin and hear between 30 to 50 cases and would finish by 1 p.m. That's only 3 hours to hear that many cases. Bhaktivinoda's capacity for work was astounding to the lawyers and the Englishmen. What other magistrates would finish in 30 to 45 minutes, he would finish in 5 minutes, and he would also write the judgment in detail within 1 or 2 minutes. The Englishmen over him were stunned at how he could perform this much work in such a short amount of time. So obviously they weren't going to say anything against him because he was like just a powerhouse. They all became envious and tried to discourage him. At 1 p.m. he would come home and clean himself up, become refreshed. Before 2, he would again be in the office, so that was his lunch hour. At 5, he would come home and take some Sanskrit religious books and dictate them in Bengali to someone. After this, he would take his evening bath and meal, which consisted of a little rice, a couple of chapatis, and a half quart of milk. Bhaktivinoda Thakur worked with a pocket watch, so everything he did was done on time. He was very charitable. It was never heard that any Brahmana ever went away from his home disheartened, and he who once called on him was, to be sure, seen meeting with him with a smiling face. He befriended other castes, and especially when he preached Harinam, everyone, however high or low, was nearest and dearest to him. So he didn't differentiate between who he would talk to Krishna about. So he was the first one also that wasn't really, he didn't care for caste consciousness. He actually, in the mood of Lord Nityananda, he actually broke open the storehouse of love of God and distributed the holy names quite freely. He had practically no enemy in this world and did not cherish any kind of animosity against others. We know that he thwarted a lot of persons, particularly that one famous person who purported himself to be Vishnu, and others who were cheaters, and others who also, would try to disparage the Vaishnava, the Gaudiya Vaishnava philosophy. So he was no nonsense. He was highly, extremely regulated. He was 100% fixed in his bhajan and in the holy names. and he's one of our greatest inspirations in our daily lives, because he's one of our most famous acharyas. And I encourage everybody to read about him because he's very inspirational. There's a nice book called The Seventh Goswami that's not too long that I didn't see in the case, but I know it is available. It's a good read. Hare Krishna. Bhaktivinoda Thakur ki jai.
Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Marhamatam Samasitam Buddha Sundarangam Kandar Agom Vikamaniya Vishesha Shobha Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Angani Yasa Sakalen Priya Priti Manti Lasyan Dipan Kayanti Jiram Naganti Ananda Chinmaya Sadhu Jala Vigrahasya Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami 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 Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami
Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And Lila Shakti went home to get a photo. So we'll use the photo on the phone for now. So this is the, yeah. And these are the invocation prayers that we recite for Pushpanjali. Om Ajnana Timarandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kada Mayam Dadati Swa Padantikam Bandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Saugrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadbhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Iti Namane Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvisesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarane. Why don't you get a songbook, Dave? Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Siddhanta. Hare Krishna. Oh, don't worry. It's not that bad. No glass, at least. Saraswati Iti Namine Shri Varshabhanavi Devi Dayitaya Kripabjaye Krishna Sambandha Vijnana Dayane Prabhave Namaha Madhur Yojvala Premaja Shri Rupanuga Bhaktida Shri Gaura Karuna Shakti Vigrahaya Namostute Namaste Gauravani Shri Murtaye Dinatarine Rupanuga Garudapa Siddhanta Dvantarine Namo Gorakishoraya Sakshad Vairagya Murtaye Vipralamba Vasambode Padambujaya Te Namaha. Can you put it back? It timed out. She went home to get a picture. Just Namo, just try to, it's on back. Namo Bhaktivinodaya Satchidananda Namine Gaura Shakti Swarupaya Rupanuga Varayate Gaura Vir Bhava Bhumestvam Nirdeshta Sajjana Priya Vaishnava Sarvabhauma Shri Jagannathaya Te Namaha Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Pancha Tattvatmakam Krishnam Bhakta Rupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhakta Shaktikam Namo Maha Vadanaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gora Trise Namaha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabando Jagat Pate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Jayatam Sodato Pangor Mama Manda Madirgati Matsarvasva Padambojo Radha Madana Mohano Divyad Vrindaranya Kalpa Trumada Srimad Ratnagara Simhasana Stau Srimad Radha Srila Govinda Devo Prestalibi Sevyamano Smararami Shriman Rasa Rasarambi Vamshivata Tatastitaha Karshan Venu Svanayar Gopir Gopinata Shriyastunaha Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivas Adi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare So we're going to offer flowers 9 times. So save enough flowers for 9 times. Namo. Thank you. Bhakti Vinodaya. Satchidananda. Namine. Gaura Shakti. Swarupaya. Rupanuga. Varayate. Esha Pushpanjali. Esha Pushpanjali. Esha Pushpanjali. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur ki. Namo Bhaktivinodaya Satchidananda Namine Gauda Shakti Swarupaya Rupanuga Varayate Esha Pushpanjali Esha Pushpanjali Esha Pushpanjali Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur ki jai. Namo Bhaktivinoda. Namo Bhaktivinodaya Satchidananda Namine Gauda Shakti Swarupaya Rupanuga Varayate Esha Pushpanjali Esha Pushpanjali Esha Pushpanjali. Jai Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur.
I think she threw a lot of flowers. It
Oh.
kind of like went up.
Oh.
Cartel. Samsara dava nalalita loka Tranaya karunya ganaganatvam Samsara dava nalalita loka Tranaya Gita Varichamadyan Manasora Sena Mahaprabhu Kirtananicha Gita Varichamadyan Manasora Sena Romancha Kampa Shutaranga Bhajo Vande Guru Sri Charanarvindam Sri Vigrahara Davanichanana Sringayatan Mandiramajanado Vigrahara Davanichanana Sringayatan Mandiramajanado Yuktasya Bhaktam Shaninyatopi Vande Guru Sri Charanarvindam Yuktasya Bhaktam Shaninyatopi Vande Guru